So Richard Dawkins is a very influential atheist. Unfortunately, he's not a very good one. I want to point out one of the most comical errors I've seen. And I'm bringing this back up because the atheist I made a video about, he seemed to completely not understand this. And the people in the comment section didn't seem to understand it either. So, let's go find Richard Dawkins' argument. This is Richard Dawkins' core argument in his book, The God Delusion, but it's logically invalid. Like, literally invalid. So, and logically invalid doesn't just mean incorrect. It means that even if, because arguments are premises, and premises lead to a conclusion, right? So, all men are moral, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is moral, right? That's a logically valid argument. If the premises are true, 1, all men are moral, 2, Socrates is a man, those are premises, conclusion is Socrates is therefore moral. The premises, if they're true, the conclusion follows. That means it's a logically valid argument. But you can dispute whether the premises are true. That's a deductive argument. This is a inductive argument, I believe. But you understand, right? Premises lead to conclusion. In this case, the premises don't even lead to the conclusion. So even if everything he said in premises were true, the conclusion doesn't logically follow. So it's a logically invalid argument. Okay, so we're gonna break down the argument in full. Okay, let me. This is very inconvenient sizing. Okay, I think you could read it like that. Okay, that's good. Alright, so premise 1. One of the greatest challenges to the human intellect over the centuries has been explain how the complex and probable appearance of design in the universe arises. 2. The natural temptation is to attribute the appearance of design to actual design itself. In the case of man-made artifacts such as a watch, the designer really was an intelligent engineer. It is attempting to apply the same logic to an eye or a wing, a spider, or a person. How do a Markelm? Markelm or Markelm? 3. The temptation is a false one because the designer hypothesis immediately raises, and this is the first major error he makes, immediately raises the larger problem of who designed the designer. I'm going to highlight that because this is... I appreciate it, bro. The whole platform we started out with was the problem of explaining statistical improbability. It is obviously no solution to postulate something even more improbable. So that's the second error. Unfortunately, I can't highlight multiple things. We need a crane, not a skyhook. Crane, skyhook, that's some phrases he has for explaining explanations, but we don't care about that. Doesn't matter for this argument. Can do the business of working gradually and plausibly from simplicity to otherwise improbable complexity. So, I'm gonna demonstrate to you why okay, let's open this up. Alright, so premise 3 is the first area where we see major problems. Okay, so yeah, and Richard Dawkins, top atheist, most influential one, but he's a complete retard when it comes to these arguments. When it comes to religion in general, he has no idea what he's talking about, but this is a great microcosm of it. So, immediately raises the larger problem of who designed the designer. So essentially the logic here is that if you're going to propose an explanation as the best explanation, you need an explanation of that explanation. But the problem with this is Richard Dawkins, the scientist himself, would completely destroy science and any form of philosophy. Any form of reasoning would be completely destroyed because this logic saying, okay, best explanation requires explanation. I'm going to give you a few examples of how this will lead to infinite regresses. And an infinite regress is when it's like, there's an infinite, like, okay, well this happened, and then this happened, and this goes on infinitely forever. And generally speaking, especially if it's vicious, this is logically invalid. It doesn't work. So, let's say you open the fridge. I'm going to use this example I used a long time ago. You open the fridge and there's milk. And it's rotten, right? Smells like dead prisoners at Auschwitz. Alright, smells terrible. Milk is rotten because he didn't buy raw milk. Instead he bought pasteurized gay J milk. Can't say the word because I'm going to get banned. Okay? Milk. Okay, you see it's rotten and it's all smells terrible, chunky, right? So you have the glass, you pour it out, it's all lumpy, and then you're like, oh well, the milk is rotten. So why is the milk sour and why is it lumpy? Okay, milk. So milk is sour and lumpy. Therefore, milk is rotten. So this is generally normal. Like, okay, there we go. Boom. End of story, right? But with this logic of having to explain the explanation, it's like, okay, well, hold on. That's not good enough. You need to explain why milk goes rotten. Okay? How does that even work? And then, of course, you can explain that. You can be like, okay, well, I don't know, the mold, microbiome, all those other nerd stuff, okay? We don't care about that. We just care that, okay, you can explain that. And it's like, okay, well, why does that happen? Then you're like, okay, well, now you have to go open some scientific textbooks, ChatGPT, and I'm like, okay, well, and remember, you have to keep going because you need an explanation of the explanation. So you go again. It's like, okay, well, entropy, I don't even think that's right, but whatever, decay, more nerd stuff. And then, okay, why does that happen? And as you can see, you have to keep going. You have to explain that. Then you have to explain that. Then you have to explain that. You have to explain that. You have to explain. You literally have to go on forever until you get to the beginning of the universe. But even that's not enough because you need an explanation of that explanation. It's an infinite regress. It never stops. So you getting milk, having it smell like Auschwitz prisoners, the ones that starved, because let's not get banned on YouTube, okay? It smells terrible. You pour it out, it's lumpy. You can't say it's rotten anymore because you need an explanation of the explanation. They need another explanation of that explanation, and you keep going, and you never stop. So it completely destroys all forms of reasoning. This thing I underline here, Richard Dawkins just destroyed science, he destroyed philosophy, he destroyed all forms of reason. And that is Richard Dawkins' main objection to God, isn't it? Every time when he debates Lennox, he debates everyone, who designed the designer? That's what he says every time. It doesn't work. You don't need an explanation. To show something is the best explanation, you don't have to have an explanation of the explanation. Did you get banned on Twitch? No, I'm just trying out YouTube. I might go back to Twitch. I'll see. To be honest, there's really no big difference, but I already have a subscriber base on YouTube, so to me it made more sense to stay on here. For now, at least. I don't see benefits of streaming on Twitch rather than YouTube. And vice versa. So that's the first issue. Destroys all logic and reasoning. So that alone should invalidate the argument, but let's keep going. It's obviously no solution, possibly something even more probable. Don't know where he gets that from. I think if I recall correctly, later on in the argument he goes over that more. But that's just begging the question. That's just an assertion. Okay, for the most ingenious and powerful claim so far discovered is Darwinian evolution by natural selection. Darwin and his successors have shown how living creatures, with their spectacular statistical improbability and appearance of design, have evolved by slow, gradual degrees from simple beginnings. We can now safely say that the illusion of design in living creatures is just that, an illusion. So again, that's a little bit more begging the question, because if you presuppose God doesn't exist, then that would be true, but it's kind of like you're making a circle, right? 5. We don't have an equivalent crane for physics. Some kind of multiverse theory could in principle do for physics the same explanatory work Darwinism does for biology. This kind of explanation is superficially less satisfying than a biological version of Darwinism because it makes heavier demands on luck, but the anthropic principles entitle us to postulate far more luck than our limited human intuition is comfortable with. So, it's kind of funny. He posits a multiverse. Now, this is what a multiverse is. This is terrible, bro. A multiverse is essentially an infinite amount of universes constantly spawning, right? So universe, and then we just happen, the anthropic principle, we just happen to be in the one that is finely tuned, and happen to be the one that life can live in, etc., right? But there's a problem with this. There's no evidence for a multiverse. There's literally no evidence for a multiverse. So his problem with saying, well, God is because you don't have an explanation for who designed the designer, but he doesn't even have an explanation for his own explanation of what why the universe even exists. So he's being hypocritical in his own arguments. Literally, within his own argument. The argument's not even finished yet, and he's already contradicted himself very strongly. And you also find that it's a lot less simple, because it says, it's obviously no solution to postulate something even more improbable. We're saying one God, one, created everything. What's being said here by Richard is, well, infinite amount of universes led to what we have now. One is simpler than infinite, okay? Simplicity, within this respect, is kind of like Occam's razor. Don't postulate unnecessary new suppositions, right? An infinite amount of universes and an infinite amount of new suppositions that are unsupported. We're just saying one, they say infinite, they say we're being complicated. Doesn't make sense. Now 6. We should not give up the hope of a better crane arising in physics, something as powerful as Darwinism for biology, but even in absence of a strongly satisfying crane to match a biological one, the relatively weak cranes we have at present are, when abetted by the anthropic principle, self-evidently better than self-defeating skyhook hypothesis of an intelligent designer. So, let's grant all of these. Premise 1 is true. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all true. What does that lead to? Absolutely nothing. Don't infer design from the appearance of design. That's the most you get from it, but it doesn't show that atheism is true in any regard. This is Richard Dawkins' primary argument.